I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
And this is When East
Meets West.
Well, so there's lots of fads in Eastern and Western worlds. Sometimes it's skinny jeans, sometimes it's bell bottoms. So one thing we'll talk about now are retreats. Hey, Nikki.
I was not expecting that intro. That was
You're welcome.
That was very like snazzy.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I like to improv, and you just bring bring out the best in me. No, but so we joke, but we're going to talk about retreats because many people do them, and they are like a custom in the practice within many Eastern traditions. And so what's your understanding of retreats, Dr. Rubin?
Very formal. Okay. Well, I mean, I think I don't know actually a lot at all about.
Wait, yes, you do.
Like,
Stop
no. About, I was gonna say about sort of the origins of it. Like you're saying, I know of it only through sort of like how it's made its way into like modern wellness circles.
But you've been on really great and fancy retreats.
Well, yes, yoga retreats, but
that's
it's like,
fine.
and they have been great, but it's like, but I think I want to, yes, they're great. And I think there's a bit of a attachment to a story around retreats these days in sort of, again, like saying modern Western wellness circles, that they're sort of like the answer to things, and they're certainly fun. I mean, it's like, for me, they've been more vacation. There are vacations where I get to like practice a lot of yoga, which is important to me, but which is great. And we need those things. But I think a lot of people sort of view them as this, like, it's going to be this altering experience, which could be, but it I don't know, may not be. Yeah.
Well, and that's why we're doing this episode, because there's a lot of people that are going to go for retreats, especially, as I like how you said, that's often just wellness based. I found this place over here on the East Coast and this is brilliant. You could go there and like stay for a week and work, and it's like all clean food and like all like the yoga and like pools and just really wellness. Right. And by the way, I can't wait to go.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so the Merriam-Webster says that it's a period of group withdrawal for prayer, meditation, study, or instruction under a director. So we're giving that because I love to do that too.
Yes, you do. You do. Yeah.
And it could be so many different things, retreats. Like, so to your point, there could be yoga retreats, could be a wellness retreat. In Zen, we do retreats often. We call them sessions, which are just longer sitting periods.
Okay.
So when you're meditating, ideally you meditate in sunrise and sunset, and ideally, for whatever time period, 30 minutes ish would be nice. But then they often encourage us to at least once every X amount of time have a longer sitting period. So I've done as much as I think 9 or 10 days. But you can also just do 1 or 2 days. And so those days, usually you kind of start at 6, you end at like 8 at night. And there's like different sitting, walking meditations, and some breaks and meals in between. But
when you do, can we throw in, listeners should know this, Pete does a lot of silent retreats.
Well, that's why I talk so much when I'm on air. Just got to get it in.
Yeah. I mean,
thanks for interrupting me there.
Yeah.
I did just do a 2.5 day silent retreat, maybe like a month ago. So, and I missed you. So maybe I just had to get all that in there with what the different types of retreats.
But I think that's like an important, like those are that's, I would say like next level. Like I mean, I think it's awesome that people do it, but I will share genuinely, I have absolutely zero interest in ever going on a silent retreat.
Oh God, it's not, and I can't wait to go on my next.
Yeah, you love it, and I do like being quiet. It's not like being quiet, but it's that to me doesn't it sounds like anxiety inducing, like trapping. It doesn't feel. It doesn't to me have a. It doesn't seem like a place where I'm like gonna feel like quiet and still.
Well, the meals could be that. Well, no, I'm with you, and I'm sure. Shout out to multiple listeners out there who probably feel the same exact way. Yeah. And I think the majority of the world probably feels that way.
Right.
If we're being honest. But, I will say that I feel that way, that trapped feeling initially with meals. So like with a silent retreat, you'll sit at a table with people and eat and not talk.
Wow.
And the first time I did it, I was like, what the, like,
Right.
felt
Right.
really trippy, but now I get it and you understand.
Sure.
Like anything else, it just takes practice.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, I mean, I still think it's amazing people do that, including Pete. And I just wanted to share that for people to know too. It's like, it's okay to not want to do certain things or that not align with what works for you. Right. Like, so, again, if we sort of talk about retreats as, opportunities for an individual to take care of themselves, there isn't like a right or wrong way to do it. And I do think that they're kind of, again, like, human brains, like attachment to stories and judgments, right? That there can be these stories around like, well, you're only really doing it if you go on a silent retreat, or you're only really doing it if you do this. And it's like, these are opportunities to take care of oneself, but they're not, there's no one right way to do it. And they're also not, I feel like I'm going to use this word wrong, but like panacea, right? Is that the word? Am I using it right? Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm using it right. Okay.
Hey, like,
they're not.
Hey, Wessler.
Yeah. Yeah. Not panaceas, right? Like, so it's not, they're not like magic all or nothing things, right? Like it's just an opportunity to potentially like jumpstart something or give yourself extra space, but you can't do all the work on yourself just in a retreat.
Exactly. It's got to be a build up too. So like one thing that's important is, so we've referenced John Kabat-Zinn. And so for our listeners, he is one of the first kind of authors, practitioners who brought, mindfulness to the West. And he has developed a protocol called mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. And on the 6th week of the 8-week protocol is a full day retreat. So as people are, and the protocol was developed for chronic pain and chronic illness. And it's really shown to be effective. And I'll also judge it sometimes because it's like very strict and rigid, which many folks can't. So in particular, one of the things I work on in the world of sport is that athletes do not have an hour a day to do that. And so that's 45 minutes is the expectation a day, 7 days a week, plus the group about 2 hours.
Right. Yep.
So, and what we know, and we've talked about on here, is that 5 minutes can help. Like there's no real measurement as to which number makes the difference.
Yes. Well, and, as per usual, you and I are on the same wavelength because you're trying to get at something I was just thinking of was like, I don't think we can talk about retreats without talking about issues of privilege.
Yes.
Right. So, right.
Yes.
So it's about, the issue of privilege of like what you're talking, like you have to not only have the time to leave your job,
That's
you know what I'm saying? Or your kids or whoever, right. To go have that time alone. But then the cost of these retreats is oftentimes exorbitant. Right. Like a lot, they can't, I mean, I'm curious about like, again, in the Zen community, if there are sort of retreats that are more
totally
cost effective, like not so prohibitive, but a lot of the retreats that are, sort of advertised, it's really, this,
well, that's just the circles that you run in. No, I'm just
it's like,
hey, LA, like hey, West Coast,
right? Well, right. Well, New York's got it too. New York's got it too. Yeah, New York's got it too.
But your retreat pictures look prettier because you got palm trees.
Yeah, fair. But I think there's like pieces that we want to acknowledge, like around like whiteness and like and like appropriation of things, right? It's like saying like,
no, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Because it's both time privilege, it's race privilege, it's class privilege.
It's class privilege, and and I think that there's these in the current era, right? Like obviously everything's like a both. Like on the one hand, it's in my opinion like wonderful that mindfulness practices and these Eastern practices are sort of more known, right? Like they're not sort of judged in the way they were even like 20 years ago, right? There's a lot more openness to it. However, there's also the the sort of like capitalistic implication. And again, not saying that that's bad necessarily, but it's like then it becomes like who gets to access these things, right? And it's sort of sold as like luxury and these kinds of things when it's like that's not really what the initial intention was.
Probably not the origin of it. Although
probably not. That would be. And again, I'm not that. And I.
Okay,
But
sorry,
yeah.
go ahead. No, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I want to be clear, like I'm not trying to also like judge luxury. I'm not saying
Yeah.
like I've gone on like very lovely retreats. I'm not saying there's anything bad or wrong about that.
Yeah.
But I do want to think a lot about of like when we say things out in the culture of like, you know, you should just be able to go. Pete and I aren't saying this, but people go like, you should just go on a retreat, like
Yeah.
get away. It's like can you? Can you afford
Can you
that?
afford
Like,
it? Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I find myself saying, rather than going on a retreat, you should have an internal retreat often and all the time.
I love that. Yeah, I love
because
that.
you don't need to go to Switzerland for 7 days to then have this thing to then rejuvenate. You need to have that in your everyday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thought I'm having is 9 Perfect Strangers.
Yes, is that the title? I think that's what it is.
I did look it up. Yeah,
it is. Okay, with
so.
Nicole Kidman. Yeah,
yes,
it was a great show.
Well, and so talk about privilege. Like, so that
that's what it's about. Yeah,
that's exactly what it's about. And that there was that Black couple there. So for those who haven't watched it, maybe you watch it because you also look at sort of like how it's a very rich series, no doubt.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah. And speaks to this, you know, speaks to what Pete and I are getting at. So it's like, I think.
Well, yeah. And actually, well, no, sorry, because I think this is another fad of retreats, because another fad that has been, it's like sort of ayahuasca, like that. I'm sure that our listener may think we're talking about that as well, which, okay. So 2 things that might be more of the genuine origin of retreats, frankly.
Yes. Right. If we go, yeah. Well, except in that case, well, it's not just ayahuasca, it's any of the psychedelics or hallucinogens, right? So like psilocybin and again, I actually like I don't think I've said this to you, Pete, but I keep telling like students, like, you know, the 4th wave of CBT is probably going to involve psychedelics. I think that's what it's going to be.
Doubt.
So there's a lot of
because listeners, the research is fascinating.
It's fascinating and really cool. When we got to have an expert on, and we got to do an episode about that.
Oh, that'd be good. Yeah.
Yes. So there's some really wonderful stuff coming up along those lines, though. I would kind of, and again, my knowledge is limited, but it's like, I would say, but even around using psychedelics, I've never actually heard of it being the origins being a retreat. It was more just used like medicinally, like in shamanic practice. You know, I'm saying it would more be,
But they had the shaman there to treat them, and they would stay for a period of time. Sure. So that's why it's based on the Merriam-Webster definition. Because then I'm also thinking, because you said about privilege, and you're like, I don't think that was the origin. But then my thought was maybe it was because maybe rich sort of clergy or like the royalty would have a retreat to get away from like the regular people. We don't know. So
interesting. No, that's very interesting. No, that's very interesting. And I think this is just where, you know, again, we want to just stay curious about like, you know, what these things mean. Right. And I bring
it back to the Western behaviorism.
Well,
thank you.
Slash Eastern practices too, right?
To stay curious.
Stay curious. Well, and I think like, you know, again, it's like retreats can be really wonderful. And I think if that's something that you can do, right? Like, and or that you want to do, or it seems helpful. Absolutely. There's 1 day, there's half day, there's, you know, one's far away in other places that are like vacation. Great. You know, but I really love what you said, Pete, about, you know, we also need to be able to find that space and that retreat internally.
Yes.
Because I think that's the thing that sticks for me is like, I've also worked with a lot of people where they'll go on some retreat and it's like, they'll sort of view it as like, it's like, that's going to fix everything. And I'll say like, that could be a really powerful experience. And like, you live in your own life, like every day is in a retreat. Like,
that's right.
How are you going to keep that space? How are you going to maintain the space?
Yes. Yeah. And I love it. And that's the important message here. So retreats are helpful. They're not for everyone. They're not for everyone in every moment. So if you're curious about it, just stay curious, you know, consider if you want to take one, do your research, find where they are, you know, maybe ask a friend for a referral. But the key is understanding that any kind of wellness is a journey. It is not a sprint. And so perhaps looking at it as the journey is the outcome.
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economo.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economo and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.